Hi everyone, my name is Adi and welcome back to the channel. Originally, my goal was to make one video per week, but this is an awkward time for content creation because Series 5 and 6 are kind of dead formats and I'd rather not blindly speculate about Crown Tundra. So what I'd like to do is make videos that will help you learn things that are applicable in any format and make you better at Pokemon. This is usually easier with context, and today, the concept that I want to talk about is why speed control is overrated. And the context is the team that I used in the IC or the Players Cup qualifier, or whatever you want to call it, which of course was in Series 5. If I remember correctly, I played 26 games and finished with a 20-6 record and a 1689 rating. I think about 5 other people use this team, and while I haven't spoken to 2 of them, I think everyone who used it did actually qualify for Players Cup, and 2 of them finished right above me at 1690 and 1691. So it really did its job pretty effectively. I also did pretty well on the Pokemon Showdown ladder with it back in like the beginning of August, I think. But I'll talk a little bit more about the team later. First, I want to talk about why I think speed control is overrated, or at least overused by newer players. Every month, Pokemon Showdown releases usage stats that are broken up by rating. So the 1630 stats basically only look at players with above a 1630 rating, while the 0 rating stats look at every player who uses every team. And if a Pokemon is on more good teams than on teams overall, it's probably an underrated Pokemon, right? And on the other hand, if a Pokemon is on a lot fewer good teams than they are on teams overall, then it's probably a little overrated. Now, this method does have its flaws. It turns out that good players just tend to use high usage Pokemon, and so the list of underrated Pokemon are just Pokemon that everyone knows are already good, and also Magnezone. Hint, hint. The most overrated Pokemon, which I do have on screen right now, tell a very different story. First off, this isn't to say that these Pokemon are bad. Most of them can be used very effectively in specific roles on very specific teams. For example, I used Comfey very effectively on my first Players Cup team. However, being on this list means that they are placed on more teams than they should be. Maybe newer players tend to look to these Pokemon, and I think that's why Speed Control especially is a little overrated, because you see both of the priority Tailwind Pokemon in the format, Talonflame and Whimsicott, are very high on this list. In fact, if you look at a list of just speed control Pokemon in the format, you see that all but 3 or 4 of the common speed control Pokemon are used way more on low ladder than they are on high ladder. So why is this? Well, the main problem with a dedicated speed control Pokemon is that it doesn't put any pressure on the field. Clicking Tailwind enables its partner, but unless the Pokemon is also exerting pressure, you're really playing 1v2. It's very easy to ignore, for example, the Talonflame and KO it on the last turn of Tailwind while focusing your damage on its partner. Of course, the Talonflame could switch out, but as long as you're exerting pressure or even using spread moves that might not KO it, they're going to be hard to switch into an attacker that they want at high health. Usually, again, Tailwind is used to support frailer attackers. Again, Dynamax has made it a lot better in that respect, but those frailer attackers don't get that HP boost when they just switch in. And so, even if they do switch out successfully, they spent a turn clicking Tailwind, and then they spent a turn switching out. So that's 2 turns that they spent setting up an attacker that only really gets to benefit from Tailwind for 2 turns, one of which will probably be blown into a double protect. So in other words, if a Pokemon sets a speed control and then doesn't do anything, it's probably bad. As an aside, 71% of Comfey run Trick Room, which of course our Players Cup team didn't. Comfey only really does things when your Pokemon are damaged, so it can heal them up with Floral Healing, or when your opponent's Pokemon are heavily damaged, so we can clean it up with like +3 priority, Giga Drain, or Draining Kiss. And if it sets up Trick Room, which it usually wants to do on turn 1 of the game, it has the same problem as these other speed control Pokemon. It doesn't do anything. And it just sits there, and you really need to switch out, and it's tough to do that. And so I think that's part of why it's at the very top of this overrated list. I think people are just using it very wrong, and on the wrong types of teams. So on the other hand, setting a speed control and furthering a game plan is very, very good. Mimikyu and Indeedee just do damage in a way that other speed control Pokemon really don't. Porygon 2 and Dusclops, on the other hand, are very different because more often than not, they don't set up Trick Room turn 1, and they actually have the bulk to switch into things. They're also really hard to KO, so even if you stall out Trick Room, they can reset it, and if you attack into them, they have recovery moves, and so they really kind of punish you for attacking into them because it's almost a wasted turn. So to summarize, the most common ways of dealing with teams that rely heavily on speed control is by stalling out the speed control while exerting enough pressure to prevent those free switches. Spread moves like Dazzling Gleam and Rock Slide, boosting moves like Swords Dance, sleep moves like Spore, and also just protect can help you execute this depending on what their Pokemon are. That being said, Tailwind is still very, very good. So the question that I had to answer for my team was, how do you punish the plays that people normally try to execute against Tailwind Reliant teams? Well, if you've been watching this channel, one of the things you've noticed is that a lot of my friends and I like to deal with passive play on offensive teams, but just putting them to sleep.
And so our anti-tricker mode is Clefairy, where you put the Clefairy in Trick Room, and then you click Sing until you win. This is a good strategy. I highly recommend it.
It's very powerful.
Enter Drifblim. Drifblim was introduced to me back in like August by Elisa, who I think mentioned this in her team report that's on the channel. And we both built it individually after that and talked before the IC and found out we were basically using the same team. I also used the team a while ago in the finals of the European Team Championships hosted by Victory Road, where I beat Pato in that match, and you can watch that on YouTube in the description. But I digress. The pitch was essentially that against offensive teams, they are stuck not executing their game plan because taking a KO, either the Indeedee in this case or the not the Hatterene on the Drifblim, allows you to bring in your heavy hitters, and they have speed control behind them, and they're just really, really easy for them to take KOs. Against passive play, we can punish it by clicking blind hypnosis until they eventually decide that maybe we should take out this Drifblim. And you obviously don't hit all of the blind hypnosis, but you really only need to hit one or two, and in 45 games, it really evens out. If you hit a hypnosis turn one and you're so fast, like they don't have a chance to move, it's really, really powerful. And so they do really have a reason to try to take out the Drifblim. And it's paired with Indeedee, which sets up terrain and procs its Unburden with its Psychic Seed. And Indeedee does solid damage on its own with Expanding Force, which means if they're not taking a knockout, they're taking a lot of damage back. It can also imprison the Trick Room, and if my opponent leads Pranks or Tailwind, or something else that is really fast and is a threat that doesn't make me want to set up Tailwind, I can always click Trick Room on my own. So that's actually really important because I built the team with the idea in mind that I might have to click Trick Room, and in fact I did click Trick Room quite often. Setting up their own Tailwind is just kind of problematic because I kind of want to be faster. The two biggest problems with Indeedee are Dark types and Rillaboom, and the rest of the team is built with a focus on beating Dark types because they are actually very problematic for both Drifblim and Indeedee. And also Rillaboom, but Rillaboom also gets two-shot by Acrobatics from Drifblim, so that's makes them an even better pairing. The team punishes you really hard for taking a KO. So something that I think in general players have to learn over time is that you have to take KOs at the perfect time, and you have to game plan that out. You can't just take KOs when they're available because a lot of times offensive teams will just use that to position and run you over. They'll gain a lot of momentum from you taking a KO. It's also very important in end games. Like this is 10 times more important in GS Cup format. So if you played 2019, you probably got the hang of this, or just like exclusively played Zernala, I guess. But more importantly, we found an effective way to make our speed control Pokemon do something while they're waiting to get knocked out, which is really the goal. So I'll quickly go over the rest of the team now and their roles and what the tougher matchups are. Indeedee's last move was Ally Switch, which I thought was cool because you could imprison Ally Switch, but that literally never came up. You can also use it proactively to protect an attacker and also get another free switch when they KO the Indeedee, which was just like it's a good move. It really is. Drifblim lives a jolly Excadrill Max Steel Spike. That's what the EV spread does. It doesn't live an Adamant Steel Spike all the time, but it outspeeds Adamant even if they have Sandrush up, so it's not a big deal. Also, Drifblim is kind of a weird Pokemon in terms of stat allocation, and so investing in defense and special defense is way more valuable than investing in HP because it already has a massive base HP. And Strength Stab also benefits from having a lower HP because you gain back percentage of HP based on how much attack you reduced. The main Dynamax target of the team is Cinderace. It's just the best individual offensive Pokemon in the format, and it just stacks boosts. It does so much damage. I went Adamant, which makes it do even more damage, and I just figured I'm not going to speed tie other Cinderace because I'm just going to set up Tailwind. And everyone calcs for Jolly Cinderace. A lot of Incineroar, for example, are EV to live and attack from Jolly Cinderace, and so when you're Adamant, you get a lot better rolls. Also, by the time your Tailwind runs out, you've clicked Airstream a bunch of times, so you don't really need the support anymore, and it even supports the Pokemon that might twitch in second after they KO the Indeedee if you KO the Drifblim first, or vice versa. It also KOs Dark types with fighting moves. It KOs Rillaboom with Max Airstream. It KOs everything. 3 of the moves are kind of a given, and the 4th move is a max dark because dropping Spin Death is really good too. And you have an Indeedee that can benefit from that, you have Toxtricity, and you have Togekiss to benefit from that. So Toxtricity was the second attacker. Tommy DeRosa's team really showed me that a lot of teams folded to Cinderace with Toxtricity, and so I tried to abuse that by putting them next to each other as much as possible. This was supposed to KO Rillaboom, that was kind of its job, but it does take 50% or so from Grassy Glide, so that kind of sucked. At the last minute, I changed the 4th move to Acid Spray because in theory it helps me power through Porygon 2, but also it really enables Togekiss really well because you can Acid Spray and then click Max Airstream. But I think I clicked it once in 26 games, and that is one more time than I would have clicked Taunt or Boom Burst in 26 games, so it is what it is. Togekiss was added for 2 reasons. The first is that Scope Lens Togekiss ignores stat debuffs and lets me KO through screens. It's one of the few Pokemon that can beat the standard Instant Rillaboom Water defensive core, although it does suck against Porygon 2, which is now standard on this core. And more importantly, I needed a way to punish offensive teams that match Tailwind, but I needed to be able to do damage in Trick Room, which Cinderace doesn't really do because it's still pretty fast. And so I also wanted a way to play the game if I didn't get to lead exactly in DD Drifblim. And Togekiss kind of enables those game plans. You can do things like Cinderace, Togekiss, and DD Toxtricity, which is just 4 very good Pokemon. And if they deal with Indeedee Drifblim, then maybe they can't deal with Cinderace, and if they deal with Cinderace, maybe they can't deal with maxing the Togekiss, and so there's just a few more options that you have, and you don't really have those options if you don't have a Pokemon like Togekiss that can be both an attacker and a Gloomon. At the time of making this team, I think a lot of teams were weak to Scope Lens Togekiss. If you watch the match with Pato, again, in the description, he had basically no matchup for it, and that's not really true anymore. I think there's a lot more counterplay to it. Again, mainly Porygon 2, which can just absorb the damage, although I think it's still a very strong Pokemon. Also, I needed a way to hit Ferrothorn, and so there's a Fire move on it, and the speed stat was updated to outspeed Urshifu at +1, while still slow enough to really abuse Trick Room. And then finally, the last lot for the team is Choice Band Azumarill. This was originally a Choice Band Dracovish, but I needed to punish people in Trick Room. And it's like Dracovish was like the hardest hitting thing in the format, and it's in that mid-range speed to operate in both Tailwind and Trick Room. But the weakness to Dark types, and specifically Grimmsnarl, made me reconsider that slot or just the team in general and try to figure out how to beat it. And then Elisa said she had Azumarill in the Dracovish slot, which does basically that. It has Play Rough to hit those dark types. It just does so much damage with its Choice Band Liquidation. It's like very comparable to Dracovish. And so without any testing, I said, yeah, that sounds great. That works in theory. Let's go with it. And the speed stat outspeeds Timid Colossal, so I could KO it if they choose not to give it a speed boost. And obviously, it's still a pretty slow Pokemon, so if they do set up Tailwind, or even if they don't, if they just have a faster team in general, then Trick Room, it just runs through teams in Trick Room. Cole is kind of problematic. Togekiss is obviously just really good into it. I talked about that in another video, but they don't do enough damage with their Dynamax. If they don't do enough damage to the Dynamax. If they do enough damage to the Dynamax, the game's kind of over. But if they don't, then Togekiss can max and do a lot. And Azumarill is very good at pressuring the Cole so that they kind of have to focus it down. They might not be able to get Vocalith up. And they kind of have to play around the fact that Choice Band Liquidation just KOs it even in the sun. So the things I liked about this team was that it has a really good matchup into Ted and really good matchup into Sun. Sun just really struggles with Indeedee in general, and now I can set up Tailwind and I can let it move before Venusaur. That is broken. There's nothing on the team that wants to take a Expanding Force except for Tyranitar, which folds to basically every other Pokemon on this team. That's not Drifblim, I guess, and also Dusclops, but like Dusclops also just doesn't actually do much. And I have such a hyper offense team that I can run through it, especially with Cinderace. Cinderace is really good there. I can put it to sleep. There's just a lot of stuff. Cole was iffy, but the Colossal Face and the Icy just kind of let me liquidation them, we take those. It might be more difficult in a best of 3. Ted just kind of gets run through by Cinderace if you let it get the Tailwind up because it just clicks Max Knuckle and Max Knuckle KOs the Excadrill after you get a Expanding Force off, KOs the T-Tar just all the way through. They don't really have much stuff that really wants to take attacks from Cinderace, so they really have to play around that. And the biggest issue, I think, of the team was Porygon 2. And so I mentioned in my last video that I think the Desu team, the Porygon 2, Fire, Water, Grass, Dragapult team is the best team in the format. I still stand by that, and this team really struggles with it. it just can't power through the Porygon 2. It's a great damage sponge. Primarina is a little bit of a problem. You have to play around the Dragon Bolt a little bit, although being able to click Tailwind Expanding Force is really good there. So like really it's the Fire Water Grass Porygon 2 mode that is just so effective and kind of forces you away from that Indeedee Drifblim lead because they are very happy to just like cycle with you and not worry too much about your damage and have things like Rillaboom and Incineroar to stop your Indeedee from doing damage. They don't mind getting put to sleep. They can always max the Primarina. So many problems. But again, the biggest problem was the Porygon 2 just coming in, sitting there saying, yeah, go ahead, do your thing. Like, I'm just going to recover off the damage unless you're getting your attack boosts or you're clicking Acid Spray. So you really have to reconsider how you play the game. You can't just lean DD Blimp into them and do your things. That's also part of the reason why all my Pokemon have a 1 point extra in special defense when I could. It's because Porygon 2 just doesn't get the download boost that way, and if it doesn't get the download boost, it's just that much more annoying. So yeah, I'm fine with taking like a couple losses to that in an IC setting, but the weakness to that team specifically makes me not want to bring it to a regional. I wouldn't bring it to a bigger tournament where I expect to face that, especially as I get to further rounds where I expect to face better teams. But in an IC, I think I played it twice and I lost to Veltamum, and that's fine. It's just like you take those 2 losses and you move on. And also, even if you do have a bad matchup, you just take your hypnosis, right? And then if they stay asleep for 2 or 3 turns, you really should win. So, anyways, the moral of the story is good players don't miss hypnosis.